Hello, hello, beautiful people. Today we're going to be doing some basic and advanced Excel techniques, I think. To tell you the truth, I don't know the exact direction that we're going to go in here, but we're going to have a lot of fun, or at least as much fun as you can have in Excel. For me, that's a lot because I love Excel. So what I've done is I've actually downloaded somewhat of a morbid spreadsheet. This is all the data of every Titanic passenger who was on the Titanic, obviously. So what we've got, I actually don't know what all the columns are, but for the most part, they're pretty self-explanatory. So P class here, this is which class they are, first class, second class, third class, whether or not this person survived. We've got their full name. We've got their gender. We've got their age. This one is surprisingly 0.9167. That piece of data makes no sense to me. Possibly the data is not perfect. This one's incomplete. So we've got a few issues, and that's fine. Data integrity is something that I'm happy to take a look at. So we've got ticket numbers, fare. We've got I believe this column is whether or not they found a body. I'm not sure about that, but very morbid if so. And which boat, maybe lifeboat they were on. I'm not sure about that either. Where their home destination is. So basically the point of this is to go through a lot of techniques in Excel for data manipulation, for understanding data, how to look at it when you get a big data set. I've never looked at this data set before, and so we're just going to have some fun and play around with the functionality in Excel. And I'm going to walk you through each step and just sit back and let's learn something. And let me know if you have any questions, if there's anything you want to see or I didn't explain very well. Sometimes I move a little quickly, sometimes I move a little slowly. You can let me know that in the comments below. So as we get into this data dump from Titanic, if you like this kind of content, make sure you let me know that as well. Give that channel a subscribe. It helps me a lot and it makes me want to do more of this type of thing. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to know how many first class passengers there were, second class passengers, and third class passengers. And I think we should put that in a little chart. And I think that chart should probably be a pie chart. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm just going to lock the first row here so that when I scroll down, you'll see the descriptions actually, I lose them. And so we're going to lock that. So we're going to go to the View, File, View. We're going to hit Freeze Panes, and we're just going to freeze that first pane. And I actually did that incorrectly. So unfreeze panes. We're going to be in cell A2 here. We're going to freeze the pane. So you can see I can now scroll down, and I actually don't lose that data, which is great. Now wherever this cursor was when you hit that button, that's where you're going to go. So maybe you want to lock a row or two. That's fine, you can. That's how it would work. Now, I'm going to just make this a bit smaller. We don't need this right now. Tickets are too small. I'm trying to just clear up my screen real estate so that we can know what we're looking at. So I'm going to drop all of this for now, and I'm going to just hide it for now. I still want that data. I don't want to get rid of it. I just want it out of the way so we have a cleaner space to work with. So now we're down to just these 5 categories. Now, as I discussed, I wanted to know how many first class passengers, second class, and third class passengers there are. Now, of course, I could go and just do a count. Here's tells you the sum here on the bottom right. So I'm the 17. I go down to the bottom and find where it says 2 and etc. But we like to, when we work with data, we like to make it functional, such that if the data set was actually 5 million or any amount, we could still use the same function that we use now. Otherwise, it doesn't really work. It's either there's a difference between solving a problem and just making do. And we want to solve problems. That's what we're here to do. So I'm going to make this a little bigger. And I think what we're going to do is use the countifs function. So if you haven't used this function before, this is going to be pretty interesting. If you have and you're really familiar with it, you could probably skip ahead about a minute or so. But we're going to jump into this countifs function. So what the countifs function is going to allow us to do is to count each row if it matches a criteria. So our criteria range is our first input that we need for this function, and we're going to do the entire column. So I'm doing this on keyboard shortcut keys, so I just went to the top, I press Shift, and while holding Shift, I press Control, and I press the down key. And that allows me to select this entire function. I'm actually going to absolute reference this. That's when you put the little dollar signs in front of the letters and the numbers. In the formula bar, you'll see it up here, countifs A2, A1310. The shortcut key to make it an absolute reference is F4. So you can see I just automatically added the absolute referencing. Absolute referencing, if you don't know, is just that if I want to drag this formula, it won't move with the data, so it locks it in place. It's very helpful. And we're going to press the comma button, and our criteria is going to be, we're going to use we're going to encapsulate it in text, and it's going to be equals 1, and we're going to close that. Right, so we know that there are 323 people in our data set equal to 1 that equal first class passengers. So we're going to just label it first class, second class. I'll just do it like this. We'll put class up here. I seem to have done something. Alt-H. Getting a little lag here. Alt-H-A-L. It's going to move it over. And number. Alt-H. Alt-H-A-L. It's going to left align it. And it's not liking that functionality. Anyway, so third, and then we're going to put a border there, and we're going to do a sum. And we're actually going to do total. Right. So now, like I said before, because of the absolute referencing, I can actually just move this formula down and it'll still work. Except, of course, it's going to give me the exact same answer. It's going to say 323. So I did Alt-HVF, which is to paste the formula, but you can also just go right-click and paste the formula. Now, obviously, we need to change the equals 1 to equals 2 and equals 1 to equals 3. And now we have 1309, and we're going to run a little check. You always want to make sure that when you're doing any sort of large data sets, that you always verify that you're correct. You don't want to make mistakes. There's nothing sloppier than being sloppy. And the way to check it is literally just to do a regular count function. Actually, we could do an is blank. There's a few ways to do this. Is blank. Actually, no, we will do the count. Let's do the count. So yeah, we'll do a count A, which allows us to count anything that is a value that's not blank. So we should get 1309, and we already know that because the first row isn't included and there's 1310, that the answer is 1309. So we know it's 1309, and for a check, it's nice to check it against our previous number. So I'm just going to subtract it from our total. It should be 0. That's perfect. There we go. Our check is good. We have captured all of the data. So the last piece to do here is to insert. We're going to insert I think a pie graph, which is the most descriptive for this type of data. And it's going to let us see the breakdown of how many passengers were in each class on the Titanic, which is pretty cool. So we can see that the bulk of the passengers were actually third class passengers. That's not too surprising. And second and first class were actually a fairly even split. So they were basically looking to get 25% of the ship filled with first class passengers at one ticket price, 25% second class passengers at a second ticket price, and half the ship on the third ticket price. That's pretty interesting. Now, I'm not going to get too crazy on the chart right now, but I'm going to make a couple of minor adjustments because I hate default Excel charts. I think you'll find that. That we're typically going to be making quite a few changes when we get to this sort of situation. So one thing that Excel does quite nicely in the chart tools design is they allow you to add some of these data labels. Now, obviously, this looks horrible, but that's fine. It actually solves what we wanted. What we wanted was to have the class description, which class is it, and the percentage. And it's given us both those data points. Now we just are going to get rid of this. We're going to actually, for pie charts in particular, you usually want a square box. And you can actually drag it out. You can make it nice and big. It can fill the whole box. You don't have a lot of white space. If you use a rectangle instead of a square, you get a ton of white space. And it's really not my, it's not my favorite. Let's put it that way. And there's actually, you can actually move the pie out. I'm not going to, but just to show you, you can actually drag the pieces of pie out if you really want to highlight that one is, a certain way. I'm going to get rid of the border, format chart area, border color, no line. And I'm also going to switch it to grayscale. And I'm going to switch the text because of this word wrap. I'm going to make it a little smaller. And that should get rid of that problem. And we're just going to make this one, I press Control 1 to bring up my menu button. You can also right click it. And we're going to fill it with a light, let's try a light blue. That was not actually what I intended to do. I only wanted to fill one chunk and I managed to fill them all. If we click on the individual chunks, you can fill them one by one. We'll do a little light green and we'll do a little gray. All right, we'll get rid of this border, format chart area, border color, no line. There we go. So there's our basic chart. Now, while doing this chart, the other thing that I thought about that could be interesting is to find out what the ticket price is. How much did a first class passenger pay versus a second class and versus a third class? So we're going to do average price. And what we're going to need to do is ungroup our data. We're going to pull out our fare data. So we're going to go data, ungroup. And now it's going to split it up. We're going to close it again so we can see everything. But this time we have our fare data. And so we're basically going to do the same thing as the countifs function, but this time we're going to use the average ifs. Average ifs. So what this is going to allow us to do is if under a certain scenario, and in our scenario it's going to be if the class equals first, then average the fare. And it'll give us an average fare for every first class passenger. It's exactly what we want. And it's a really cool function. I mean, I think that this data in particular highlights just how cool that function is, but think of all the other things that you could do with it. You may even have a good idea right now. So what we're going to do is pick the, there's three inputs that we need. The first is to average the range. And the range is going to be the fare range. So we're going to select the whole thing. Remember, Shift, Control, down. We've selected all the data. Press F4 to lock it. Press the comma. Head back up to our formula. Now we need our criteria range. So based on which criteria? Our criteria is going to be the class. So we're going to do the same thing. Shift, Control, down. Lock it. Comma. You getting the hang of this? I want to make you really good on your keyboard because that's how real Excel pros do it. None of this mouse clicking stuff. We'll do it for now, but we're going to get better. And finally, it's the criteria. In this case, we're going to do equals 1. We could actually make this dynamic. In fact, we probably should make it dynamic, but for now, we'll just leave it like this. No, we're going to make it dynamic. There we go. Yep. Oh, I see. So I've made an error, and I can tell you what it is. One range is longer than the other one. I wasn't sure what was happening there. I thought I'd gone insane, but we've solved it. And we've made it dynamic, so let's just leave it for now. I'm just going to call this dynamic. So now we should just be able to drop this down. There you go. There you go. And this is your average ticket price. Make it $. So what this tells us is that first class passengers were actually paying 4 times more than second class passengers, and second class passengers were paying about 60% more than third class passengers. So there was a big incentive to be a second class passenger. You pay almost twice as much, but you have to imagine that the service is better. So I'm just going to group this out and let's see the delta. You can see how we really start to understand the data. We can learn a lot just from these very simple functions. It allows us to explain data in a very concise manner. It's very useful. So what we're going to do is take the average price. I just want to know how much more you were paying versus second class, and how much was second class versus third class. And we're going to make that, -1. Yeah, so a first class ticket was 313% more than a second, and a second was 59% more than a third. It's very interesting. So I think the other piece, and I can already see that this is the truth. Well, that may not be. But what I want to know is, first of all, how many men and women were there on the Titanic? So I'm going to get rid of all this. We'll group it out. And we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to use a count ifs. I'm going to use male. I'm going to use female. And we'll use the count ifs that we've already used before. So we're going to count it here. Lock it. If it equals the male, if it equals male, then we'll count it. We'll close it. So it's dynamic based on the data label. This is called gender. This is called count. This is the total. All right, so 1309, we already know that that's the right amount. We've captured them all. So we can see that men are actually, there were significantly more men on the Titanic than there were women. It was about 2/3 to 1/3 men versus women. That's quite interesting. Now, what do we know about age? I mean, we have each person's age. This person's is surprisingly specific, 0.9167. I think it might actually be a mistake. Or perhaps it's just under 1 year old. So I think what we'll do with the age is, what should we do? Let's say we're going to do ranges. So if they're between 0 and 10, we'll count them. If they're between 10 and 25, we'll count them. Between 25 and 35, 35 to 50, and 50 plus. We'll put them in various ranges, and we'll do a count based on that. We can also see if the ticket price changes based on age. There's a lot that we can do here. But I'm actually going to stop this video here for now. Make sure you subscribe for the next one. We're going to get back to this Titanic data. We're going to go another step in. We're going to get a bit more complicated, and you'll have to check that out in the next video.